I thought I would start with a little background about non-fiction here, non-fiction publishing, from my perspective, from where I come from. There's this perception, especially outside of India, that Indian literature consists entirely of fiction. This is because of the success of Salman Rushdie and certain other people of that period. There were a few earlier, like R.K. Narayan, who were names that were universally known. But if you go back further in time, the first books, the first universally known books located in India, about India, were all non-fiction. I'm thinking of, like, for instance, there was this book called Mother India, nothing to do with the movie, by Catherine Mayo, which Gandhi had famously trashed as a drain inspector's report. If you read it today, it addresses concerns that non-fiction today, including our panel of writers, address. So it's about the same drain. It's still a bit open. It's and the political response that it had drawn at that time was perhaps a little off. I could think of William Sleeman's. Sleeman was the commissioner for the eradication of Thuggy, and that's become a very contested space in non-fiction in India, complicated by stigmatization of criminal tribes. There was such a tradition in the administration. Now, Sleeman offers a perspective from the side of the people who were doing it. He was an administrator himself, and it has very, very surprising things to offer, insights to offer on Sati, which was live at that time. I could also mention Vasco da Gama's account. There is an account which perhaps he wrote himself, though he wrote it in the manner of Julius Caesar in the third person, and addressed himself as the Captain Major. A lot of these you can find in a very nice book by an anthology by H.K. Call, who used to head the library at the India International Center, I think it was called Travelers India, Oxford. A very nice introduction to the entire non-fiction of pre-independence India. Now, like I said, the concerns raised by Mayo are still being raised by non-fiction writers today. And there's more space for these writers because earlier, publishing has been kind of, should I say the written word, has been kind of divided between academic publishing, which is kind of sequestered, the media, which is like a public forum, and now, of course, the middle class has discovered the street. So there's activism also. But I think non-fiction of the sort that our panelists are developing, that body of work is a kind of quiet space where reflection remains possible. Reflection is very, very difficult on television, for instance, today. All discussions are very contentious. Academia seems to be, academic publishing seems to the layman, seems to speak in a private language of some kind and may not be accessible to all. But the issues that are raised in these spaces are to be discussed by all. India is moving towards its cities. It will soon cease to live in its villages, and its villages are going to be transformed by all kinds of media, including internet. I think yesterday there was this, was it yesterday or the day before that, the government announced that 3 internet connections and a Wi-Fi hotspot are going to go to every panchayat, and the rollout should begin pretty soon. Yesterday, wasn't it? So that is going to change the way India participates in both decision-making, influencing policy, and so on. And there is need for that space of quiet reflection, which these books provide. These books, social media surrounding these books, they produce surprising results. Let me give you a concrete example of what is possible here. Day before yesterday, the Supreme Court advised the government to frame rules for the protection of women and children in live-in relationships. Now, this is actually a clarification. What they were clarifying was women and children in relationships who could not be legally protected. They were making a distinction there. But it refers back to an earlier ruling from 2 or 3 years ago, when that was quite a landmark, when the court had ruled that for the purposes of inheritance, a long-term live-in relationship could not be distinguished from marriage. It should enjoy the same rights of inheritance. About that time, I remember, I don't remember who it was, there was this Swedish activist that I had met somewhere and I was speaking with, and she was on about the state of women in India, which we're very familiar with. So I told her it's a bit of a complicated story because there is activism also, which is trying to counter that, including legal activism like this. And she was very surprised, and she said Stieg Larsson had just died, you know, the mystery writer. And his entire estate had been handed over to his father and his brother, from whom he had been estranged for years. And his live-in partner had been denied everything. So surprisingly, if they had been in India, they would have been favored. I mean, the inheritance, that's a hell of a lot of money from all those books. All of that would have gone to the partner. But, you know, it's still a developing, in publishing, it's still a developing story. I can't think of a single non-academic legal work which explains such complexities readily to a general audience. Now, in this panel, such similar issues of development are addressed. Development is kind of a large spectrum. It goes from infrastructure to law, including personal law. Could I ask Mr. N.K. Singh to say a few words to start things rolling?
Thank you for that introduction, which gives the broad spectrum of the diversity of issues which non-fiction writing in this country has either addressed or needs to address. The sort of issues which have engaged me in the kind of writings and the publication that I have had so far, two of my books done by the Indian Express largely relate to really economic and social issues which are grappling our policy makers and the kind of challenges which we have right now. My latest book, which HarperCollins has done, is a book which is exclusively devoted to the story of what I call the new Bihar and what I call the symmetry between governance and development. And why is governance important? What is the impact that governance has on the development matrix? I think before I really speak one or two lines on that, let me say one overarching thing. The one overarching thing that too much of the writing in this country, even on the non-fiction area, has devoted itself to what is really metrocentric, or what happens in the central government, or what happens in the policy making from the viewpoint of Delhi. But I think that little attention is paid that a drama of development is increasingly unfolding itself more and more increasingly in the states in India. There's where the real action lies. The states in India, of course, are as big as most countries. I mean, Bihar itself, about which I have written, has a small population in some ways of just 115 million people, which is larger perhaps than the size of most countries in Europe. And very little has been written in terms of contemporary literature of what Bihar has done, where it was, what it has made, the progress, and so on. So this book of mine is devoted to a little bit of, it's an ensemble of some essays. The first essay there, which is written there, is by Amarjee Sen, who talks about Bihar, past, present, and future, Bihar's ancient glory, which is very well known, how it really began its progressive decline and how it became a basket case of economic development, and what is really the future that it has for Bihar. It has an ensemble which deals with economic issues, with social issues, with issues of education and health, and also, of course, on the cultural renaissance and the rejuvenation of Bihar. So I think what it really seeks to bring about is the important synergy between what improved governance can do to improving the matrix of change. And I think that Bihar is one case where I think that nobody really expected that after years of such progressive decline to have become a basket case of development, a basket case as far as India was concerned, a state which had really a hopeless future. How such a quick turnabout came about in a period of less than 7 years. How, for instance, from achieving just 2% rate of growth, began to grow at an average of over 11.5% if you take a period of 5 years, and how it grew really at 13, 14% for 2 years out of those 7 years. The dramatic change in terms of the innovations introduced on education, particularly on empowerment of various kinds. The girl empowerment was a very, very major story in the Bihar's development. What it has done to improving the health matrices, the infrastructure in terms of improved road connectivity and so on, and what really are the challenges which lie ahead. The book is as much about, and it is available, is as much about the decline, as much about the improvement and progress, and the fact of a large section in the book being devoted to what has been called crystal gazing, namely the challenges or development which still lie unaddressed and requires to be addressed, and how this can really be all put together in a cohesive matrix on which the overarching theme would be the improved governance and its multiplier effect on various facets of development. So that's what has really engaged me. And what has engaged me more is that as India has grown itself in the last, if you look at last decade or so, India's average rate of growth has been 7.2%, which is quite spectacular as compared to really most countries in the world. Of course, in the last 2 years, growth rates have really plummeted quite a bit, whether it is cyclical or whether it is episodic or it is endemic are matters on which the jury is still out. But India has grown in the last decade or so at 7% rate of growth. Now, in this 7% rate of growth, a drama which is not told is a drama of the states growing at really a very high rates of growth. And these are states which have given improved governance, given better life quality. What it has meant in terms of electoral politics is that those states where life quality has improved, where roads have improved, health has improved, education has improved, people's expectations about the future has improved, has really dramatically been much higher than national rates of growth. So a big story left to be untold by non-fiction authors is the drama of the states. Little has been written about Bihar. I have made a contribution. There are other panelists who have made a contribution writing about Bihar. But what has been written about Bihar can be equally written about other large states in India where development is a broad theme. And I think that the next decade or two of development in this country will see the drama of development of what happens in the large states in India and what it can do to make a difference, qualitative difference to the overall national theme and the national perspective of development. I'll stop here, but I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Pratik. And also thanks to the introduction that Pratik gave to the topic. And already Mr. Singh has talked about Bihar. My book is also on Bihar, but before we talk about that, I'll talk about my own journey in coming to writing non-fiction. I haven't written fiction yet because that's much harder. So I am an academic and I have written research papers, and I have myself always realized that bulk or almost all of whatever I have written is not going to be read by more than 12 people. If 12 people read my journal articles, I'm one of the more successful academic authors. So just to reach out, this desire to reach out to a larger crowd is there in the heart of, I think, anybody who writes or speaks. And that led to looking for subjects, for delivery vehicles, as well as for style of writing, which would hopefully address and engage a larger number of people than a typical academic research does. So a few years back, I had returned to India from the US, and I used to write on finance and economics. These are very important subjects. These are typically not the books that you will go to bed with. You need to have a fresh mind and really need to devote 2-3 hours of serious time to figure out the high theory that goes into it. And so anyway, I said, well, I want to understand what goes on in a real organization. I'm from the management side. And, economics is often called the dismal science because it talks about very sad things. Economists usually are very depressed about the state of the world. They always find things that are bad and needs improvement. The whole field of development economics would not exist the day the world becomes developed. So it's a fear that everything is all right is very threatening to lots of people. So we have to be sure that we remain in a sad and grumpy state. But I was getting bored of all of that. So I said, well, I'm going to look at what's going right. Now, there's a big risk that somebody takes when he starts saying what's going right. So what I did was, and I'll tell you what the risk is about. So the first book that I wrote in this general non-fiction category was the turnaround story of State Bank of India, a Sarkari bank. Turnarounds don't happen there. Turnarounds only happen in IBMs where elephants can dance and stuff like that. Sarkari organizations are not supposed to do all of that. Now, a real turnaround did happen in 5-6 years. And I wrote about that in a book called Grit, Guts and Gumption. And after writing that, I had sort of gathered some knowledge about turnarounds, which was not my core area of expertise. So I was looking for another turnaround to focus on, and something that was bigger than State Bank of India. And at that point, it seemed that Bihar was that story. Right? The bigger turnaround, bigger story, and almost an amazing transformation in 5-6 years. So that's what led to the next book of the Bihar, titled The Bihar Breakthrough. Now, what is the problem in talking about these positive things? Right? One of my critics, after I wrote the State Bank of India book, when it was reviewed, if you go out and say bad things, you are in safe territory. Nobody's going to criticize you. As soon as you say good things, the question is, well, what is your stake in there? How much have you taken? Is this a paid account? Right? It's much easier to publish by saying nasty things about people around you. Nobody will suspect your credentials as long as you criticize someone. As soon as you say something good, suspicions are raised. There must be some deal going on in the background. Right? But anyway, that's life. What can you do? So the other part is that, well, what is wrong with non-fiction? Why is it that fiction always trumps over non-fiction in terms of reaching out to people? Fiction is much more interesting to read. Right? Let's face it. And there's drama, there is personal connect, there are emotions. Right? And non-fiction is about serious matter, deep philosophy, serious inquiry. Right? It requires attention. I mean, that's needed. I'm not by any way suggesting that all serious matters be dramatized and turned into and trivialized at all. Serious inquiry is a very important part of life, but the unfortunate thing is people, unless they are forced by their teachers or examiners, don't put in the effort needed to really read serious matter unless that serious matter can be told in an engaging way, in a dramatic way. And that's what my attempt has been to do this. And there is a lot of drama in real life. Drama does not exist only in fiction. Take the case of this Bihar story, for instance. Right? Bihar 2005, and this is a very young crowd, so I don't know whether you have a sense of what Bihar 2005 meant. Right? You can definitely go and watch a movie by Prakash Jha called Aparan, which will tell you what Bihar 2005 was roughly there. It's a movie version of what it was. It talks about a structured industry that kidnapping had become. And kidnapping is one part of the story. It was the most broadly seen story. But Bihar was a basket case, as Mr. Singh just mentioned. And over rapid decline, it was a failed state within the state. That was the term that was being used. Right? It was really falling in a state where law and order was not functioning. The rule of law itself was suspect. Forget about development and all the other good things. In 6 years, that state has very good law and order, hugely improved roads, the health and education sectors are doing much better than before, so on and so forth. The statistics is mind-boggling. So, for example, if you look at the visits to Bihar's state-run hospitals, right, the average per month, footfalls there in 2005 was 39. 6 years later, the number was 5,200. We're not talking about 50% improvement, 60% improvement. We are talking about God knows how many times, right? Much bigger than that is the story of law and order, or people's faith in law and order, which was at the heart of development. Now, the point is, you can go on rattling statistics. It's impressive. People will look at it, and you still haven't explored the key question: how? Statistics tell you with some amount of doubt, right? As I'm sure you have all heard, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So nobody really believes statistics, and statistics can be spun in particular ways. But if you are there in Bihar, you can see it with your own eyes to some extent. Now, the fact is, well, how did this happen? That story is probably as dramatic as any fiction writer can come up with. So I'm not going to take a long time, because it's a long story, and you really have to buy and read my book to get the whole story. So I'm not going to tell it for free. But, so I'll just give you an example. So think of this. This is real life. I'm not making this up. So a cool morning of December 2005, newly elected CM, Nitish Kumar, he hasn't even moved into the CM's residence, right? And calls in a certain additional ADG, Additional Director General of Police, Mr. Abhanand. And he tells him, because he needs to fix law and order. That's the number one challenge. Law and order is broken. Right? So he says, Abhanandji, police ki rutba dikhaiye. Show them the strength of the police. Right? And tell me what you need to fix this situation. Do you need more money? Do you need tougher laws? Right? And then that change happens. Bihar today in Patna, if you go, is as bad as any other city of the country. Right? It's not heaven on earth. But you will not know what Patna is today, or you will not know what Patna was 6 years ago by looking at Patna today. Or for that matter, many other Bihar cities. How did the change happen? Was it more money? No. Was it tougher laws? No. So all that Abhanand said is, no, you let me do it. You let the politician get off. I don't want any kurta pajama in police stations, right? Get them off there, I'll fix it, right? And it's not just he, the whole team and the whole thing, and the law and order did change, and it's a hugely dramatic and interesting story of innovations. Small innovations and large innovations going on in what you would normally think a very boring world of bureaucracy and police officers, file pushing. But that's where small changes happened, and the administration put in a situation where these innovations were both allowed and pushed, in fact. So I'll stop here. Maybe in the Q&A session more can be discussed. Thank you.
Just wanted to share a little bit of an anecdote. Told my friends to come over for this lit fest. They're saying, Chetan Bhagat aa raha hai kya? I said, Amish bhi nahi aa raha hai. But, well, Chetan could actually be part of this, because what Young India wants is a work of non-fiction, and it's selling actually, as a matter of fact. It goes to show that non-fiction work is something that is being taken seriously even by the best-selling fiction author. So there is a great amount of scope for non-fiction work. I think there is a lot of absorption of that sort of work. A lot of talk has happened on Bihar, so I'll just take a minute and I'll just share my experiences. And it's great when you have a lesser amount of crowd, because then it can become interactive. Honestly hope that we can take a few questions also. I don't have statistics. I haven't worked with the government, and I obviously am not associated with any hi-fi business school. But I do have experiences over 10 years of traveling all over India, covering stories from shining and sinking India. That's what the title of my book is. Because you know what happens is, when you come back after a long story and you've put on your story, then people come to you and say, Acha, but tumne kiya kaise? What was that story? How did you put that story on air? What was the real story? Because people don't honestly believe what is put on television these days. So I wrote this book, and some of the experiences that I couldn't honestly put on television. So I'm just taking you through what happened in Bihar, and the chapter is called Pralay, after Kosi's flooding. Nitish Kumar was still managing and really getting to know the government at that point of time. Not the best of handling of cases really happened. So we go to this relief camp where the situation is supposed to be a little better. And this is what I saw. So Ritesh, my camera person, rolled the camera and the food distribution started. All attempts to make the villagers fall in line failed. The lone constable then wielded his stick and unleashed it on the crowds, hoping to create some order. But the people couldn't care less. A bruised body was better than a starving stomach. With no possibility of a queue being formed, relief workers then started flinging food packets into the air. Few packets were caught, others hit the ground and ripped open. Children then crawled on their fours and collected the chura with their soiled hands. This was the reality of superpower India, worse than dogs. That's how most of flooded Bihar victims were being really treated. Under normal circumstances, curious villagers mob a media van in rural India. Many news channels are household names. Inquisitive locals really want to know what is the purpose of you being here. But I tried to speak to some villagers to record their anger and frustration, their voices, their demands. But no one was really willing to speak on camera. They were either too numb or simply had given up hope. 6-year-old Rajesh, with a sharp eye and maturity way beyond his years, caught my attention. When I asked him about his parents, he told me that he was all alone in the relief camp and that his father had decided to stay back at a nearby village to safeguard their house in the flood. So much for law and order. Surprisingly, Rajesh had no trace of fear in his voice. The kid was sure that his parents were safe and that they would eventually join him in the relief camp. I asked him, what do you want the government to do for you? I want the government to give me a plastic sheet. Pat, came the reply. You see, it keeps raining through the night and I get thoroughly drenched. You're a journalist. I'm sure they'll listen to you. Please tell them I want a plastic sheet. I just looked at the kid wondering what to say. I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't have possibly said that the political bosses listen to nobody, leave aside journalists. However, I did promise him that I would get his word across. And I slipped a 100 rupee note into his hands that I knew unlikely would get him a plastic sheet. To this day, Ravish's face is fresh in my mind. A 6-year-old man, orphaned by the floods, but not drained of hope and courage. Relentless rains may have pounded the state, but there was no sign of defeat in Ravish's face, only the determination to weather this storm. And when I went back to my hotel, I found a huge plastic sheet spread out on the roof. Unfortunately, Rajesh could not have it because under it was more than 1 crore worth of broadcast equipment through which we would broadcast our story of Bihar. So these are some of the experiences that we collected, you know. So I don't have statistics, but I can assure you that you can talk about development policies and what the government is doing sitting here in Delhi, or you can actually go into the heartland of India and understand how much has not been delivered till now. Go into Dantewada, go into Nandigram, and you'll understand that there is a completely different India that would be completely unaware of what is going on, even of independence. Go into Dantewada, you'll understand, and you can shoot a 16th century film there also. You will not have to remove anything because the situation remains as much. People are collecting leaves, the tribals are speaking an ancient dialect that we are not even aware of, and the Maoists are making best of the situation. These are the stories that then we collect and bring it forth. So is non-fiction only a work that you can't go to bed with? I honestly hope that you can go to bed with this one. But yes, non-fiction, I would say, is now maturing. So there is the statistical non-fiction and hardcore academia study. And the other non-fiction that is now developing is awareness. And you have to read non-fiction to become aware of what is happening in this country. Because only Revolution 2020 is not going to educate you. Even that is, of course, based on facts. I mean, when I was speaking to Chetan, the Revolution 2020 came out from him going to these smaller colleges in B towns and giving speeches to these engineering colleges that are set up by politicians only for monetary gains. But that is also set up on reality. So non-fiction is definitely in. I'm sure that all of you will read a lot more non-fiction in days to come because I think it has a very, very bright future. And I honestly hope if you have any questions, we can perhaps throw it open for a few minutes to the house. Thank you.
I want to ask Mr. Singh, are you planning to ever write something about the state of Punjab? Because of the amount of the drug inputs, the way they have been putting it in, the way they are just, washing off the youth to ensure that they don't join the armed forces. Is it because, I really don't know this, is this because that, an army officer dies and the political scenario of our country says that this incident will not be a hamper in the peace talks? I mean, you can go and ask the person who's been shot in front of his wife. I'm talking about the particular officer who was killed in Samba. He's a close friend of my husband, and I really know the wife personally. And I think it is not a very nice thing. And really, you really think she's bothered about the national scenario or what goes on between India and Pakistan relation when she sees her husband die in front of her? He has an 8-year-old daughter, and the only political scenario says that this is not a hamper. Can you please write about Punjab so you can educate the youth that this is being done on purpose? And kudos to the Punjab government who's giving ₹1 lakh for the NDA and IMA aspirants. But like you're highlighting Bihar, glorifying Bihar, can you please do next Punjab, please?
Well, what I can promise you is before I begin to do the ambitious task of writing about Punjab, I must first learn about Punjab a little more of these number of instances which you are pointing. But what I have also promised to do is to speak to many of my colleagues who are a little more knowledgeable about Punjab and encourage them that stories of the kind which you have mentioned. And the story of Punjab must also be written, documented for much wider public awareness.
I'll just make an observation as to why I am not into non-fiction. I was doing my master's in social work a few years back, about 11 years back, and the book that was handed over to us has said, read it, because it will tell you what real India is, was P. Sainath's book, Why Everybody Loves Rock. And that jolted all of us out. We were into our world of Amitabh Ghosh and Salman Rushdie and even Chetan Bhagat at the point of time. And this is not us. We were in Bombay, we were studying, and this was something which is totally alien to us. But that course made us realize we should read non-fiction to be aware. But it's not just awareness. It takes you 20 steps further. When I read non-fiction, I get depressed. Because all you talk about is what's not right in your country. I get depressed. And I am in the field of HIV/AIDS in the past 12 years. I anyway get depressed. I see 4-year-olds dying because of non-ART. I get pregnant mothers delivering babies who could have been easily saved. I have transgendered people coming and saying government is not doing anything for us. And I work with National AIDS Control Organizations. So, you meet all these people on a day-to-day basis. And then you go back home and then you read non-fiction. It's depressing. I cry. And I don't cry because I'm depressed. I cry because I do not know how to go about it, how to fix things. So I don't know.
You cry because it's a stirring experience.
It is.
Yeah.
Every non-fiction.
Have you heard Sainath sing and play the guitar? That's an even more stirring experience. Really, he's very good.
I have heard P. Sainath talking to us for 2 hours and with absolute silence. But when you go out, with even such talk, even talks like this, what are you doing with your life? Now, there's so much happening in your country, there's so much happening around you.
Yeah.
And I have been to PHCs and CHCs 2 years back. And yes, development is taking place, but there are people who think, मैडम हमें 3 साल से पैसा नहीं मिला. आप तो नेशनल कंट्रोल से आए हो, आप जाकर के सेक्रेटरी से बात क्यों नहीं करते?
Well, thank you. I think I'll just make a couple of quick comments. Firstly, I don't think, reality or truth, whatever. Truth is a philosophical term. Even facts or complete facts is a very difficult thing to capture. For example, I never set foot in Bihar before writing this book. I'm a Bengali. I've been to parts of Jharkhand on tourism, but that was a long time back. So I came in with, totally unexperienced thing. So I was trying to figure out a particular place. Now, when I go there, what do I see? Is it like your Sarson Ka Khet, this thing movie? It doesn't happen, right? It's quite bad. So in reality, the glass is always half full, or not even half probably. It's a question of whether it's a 1/4 full or a 3/4 full, or whether it was 1/4 full before and now it's 3/4 full. It depends on what you are looking at. It points to your drain inspector's report comment of Gandhi, right? You can always write a drain inspector's report on anything you want to write. There's enough problem to write about, and frankly, you don't even have to come to India to do it. You can do it right there in New York City, right? There is enough sadness all over. So the other part is that non-fiction cannot even have monopoly over the truth. The book that to me gives me the best description of contemporary India, really, is Arvind Adhika's White Tiger, which is fiction, right? I think lots of non-fiction books cannot even come close to the reality that it depicts in a completely fictional story. So this debate about, but my answer is, well, reality can be read in many ways, and it's not a one-dimensional, it's an extremely difficult task. And in all my books, I make it sure that, well, what I've reported is what I say truth, what I think I know as truth. I think the only truth, I'm not putting in anything else, but I have no illusion at all that it will never capture the whole truth. There's a lot of the things which will never be seen. It's always the prism through which you are seeing reality.
20 years ago, I used to report on Bihar when the Messiah was Lalu, the old Lalu with the, there were pictures of him with cattle and not with fodder and so on, the pristine Lalu. And now, some kind of revolution was expected at that point of time, and social change did happen. But there is something spectacularly different about what Nitish has achieved. What would you ascribe this to? Is it just the person, or is there a predisposing circumstance? Is it just the times?
I think that's a good question, and I wish I could give you a categorical answer, whether it is predisposing circumstances or it is driven by the political leadership there. But I think that the qualitative thing, the predisposing circumstance is this. There comes a point of time in society when I think that the mindset becomes, it can get no worse. And once you reach that point that it can't go any worse, it becomes better from there. That's the predisposing circumstance that you're talking about. The basket case, the withered state, or whatever expression you want to use. And what is the one critical factor which may have changed all that approach? And I would say that the two most critical driving changes, and only two words can describe that, and that will be adequate: hope and expectations. Hope for perhaps a better future, that a past which is best forgotten is behind him, and there is hope and optimism for a better future. And that drives expectations. And expectations drive a mindset change. So what has really happened is hope and expectations leading to a mindset change.
Hi everyone, my name is Kunal, and I would like to introduce myself as someone from Patna, because as my profession, I'm a journalist, but because there's a lot of being talked about Bihar and Patna and the kind of turnaround that has been taking place. So I would like to, with all due respect, have a lot of reservations and say that I do not agree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because I have attended 2 international growth conferences that took place at Patna, where experts, I think Mr. Singh, he was also there, and when they're talking about, and the word basket case was being flown around and thrown around from one end to the other in such a way that people, why do they assume that Bihar was a basket case 6 or 7 years ago, or if they always say like the infamous 15-year term, and then they compare it today with the so-called change in regime, where everything has become hunky-dory. I'll tell you why. Because I used to think the same way. When I was a student of engineering, I left Patna about 8 and 10 years ago. So I used to think that I had the same kind of idea about my own city, about my own state, until I decided to think it from my own eyes, to see it from. So I went back, I left my job, I started doing documentary filmmaking, and that is when I got to see the real state of Bihar. I chanced upon this book by this gentleman, I've forgotten his full name, Mr. Nambiar. His book is called, since we're talking about non-fiction, this is one of the early non-fiction written book on Bihar. It's called Bihar in the Eye of the Beholder. It's published by Macmillan. It was kind of just kept in a corner of a bookstore in Patna. I just landed upon it. And the first sentence in it was that Lalu Yadav may not have given Swarg to Bihar, but he gave Swar to Bihar. And I couldn't understand that. So I read about it later and I realized the caste equation that exists in Bihar. I went to the villages, and there people would still ask me which caste I belong to before even asking my name. What I was doing there, I had to explain myself which caste I belong to. They will tell me which village I belong to.
Yeah.
So
I used to be asked the same question. My caste was journalist. I remember that. You want to say something?
Yes. So my question what I'm trying to get to is that this whole idea of breakthrough Bihar, because this, not just gentlemen, sir, your book being the first one, I have seen in Hindi, in various languages, big books being now written about the growth of Bihar story. And I think it's just a rich tapestry of a velvet cover being thrown over the reality that exists below it. Because nobody wants to talk about the Charwaha Vidyalaya story. I know BBC covered the story. I just think that, oh, what is this rubbish? They're talking about a cattle in a school. But then I understood it from a very dispassionate perspective. That he was talking about empowering this group of young students who cannot but leave their cattle.
I totally get what you're saying.
So I'm just, if you can respond to that.
And I'm sure sir would have a lot of things to say. I'll just give you a small realistic perspective to what you're saying. What you are saying is absolutely correct. There is a huge contribution that Lalu made to the society, the culture, the class division in Bihar. There is no debating that. The same problem was suffered with the leftists also. I have done something. I have broken down a class system. I have given the lower classes a right to assert themselves. I can go to a zamindar and say, I will not work for you and to hell with you. That is the right that was given, and with the politics of Lalu. He used it for political purposes, that's absolutely okay, but that change came, there is no debating that. In the same way, and that is what the leftists had also done in West Bengal, they had made land available to the peasants, they had also killed zamindari system in their own way. However, you can't absolve Lalu of other wrongdoings or discredit Nitish for what he's done, is because Lalu stopped at doing that. He did it, he revolutionized the society, he put a lid on that sort of practices that was going on there. But where was the next step? I did that in the first tenure. I did that perhaps in the first part of my second tenure. And then what? Then I became complacent and let the whole state run amok, let criminals run amok. So what you're saying is absolutely right, but what is being said here is also true, that once a phase of revolution is over, I have dealt with the class structure, the systems, then I need to move on with the times, I need to get in investments, I need to then ensure economic stability. So the social right was there, the respect had come in, but then I need the food in my stomach. What was happening to that? What was the palayan from Bihar? So despite the respect I was getting, I was not getting food, and hence I was becoming a laborer in Punjab, I was driving taxis in Mumbai. So the second phase, unfortunately, Lalu failed dismally, and that is what Nitish is doing perfectly right now.
I was about to say about that, yes, Lalu Yadav did not live up to the expectation that was expected of him. That he became kind of an icon for many people, and he did try to level the society, try to break down the caste barriers, but then probably being surrounded by psycho fans, he inappropriate
lost the plot,
the whole idea. But then Nitish did not do any better. I mean, I just say he became just another person.
Yeah, I think that, perhaps if you look at, I don't think that anybody will seriously want to dispute the fact that a lot of social empowerment and a lot of the kind of egalitarianism which is now being taken for granted was something which Mr. Lalu Yadav did during the first part when he became a chief minister. He inherited a Bihar which was exceedingly feudal, which is broken really into groups of the kind in which there was little or no empowerment to a large number of people. But having achieved that, I think he allowed economic and social changes to freeze and to deteriorate. And therefore, I think the people definitely, apart from empowerment, as he very correctly points out, want not only food, they want schools, they want health, and they want roads. Roads from villages to various places. They want better road connectivity. They want a better life quality. They want an assurance of the security of life and property. They want to be assured that if girls go out in the evening, after 6 o'clock, after sundown, they will return home. And I think that what was pointed out really was the change in contrast to a regime of Mr. Lalu Yadav, which has developed atrophy and which had begun to become counterproductive. Do not forget that in the initial years of Mr. Lalu Yadav, Mr. Nitish Kumar was part of the team of Mr. Lalu Yadav. That's the time, I think, that when very, very big fundamental changes took place. And when Mr. Nitish Kumar left Mr. Lalu Yadav, part of the factors was because atrophy had set in and the urge for bringing about genuinely sustainable economic and social change had frozen. So I do not say that Bihar has achieved all the challenges. Indeed, if you read my book, you will find there's a big section there on what I call crystal gazing, which is the unfinished task and the unfinished agenda. and the huge challenges which are yet to be really addressed significantly. But in contrast to a time when things had frozen and things had declined, in relation to that, the change has been exceedingly significant, which statistics bring out as well as episodic experience.
It's not a real question, it's a small contribution. I'm French, and as you may know, in France, there is not one dinner without politics. So all my life I've been interested in politics. And I come to India quite often because I work with slum children. And when a friend of mine told me about this NonFiction festival, I really jumped over that. And I think it's very, very exciting, and it's very rewarding to be here. A NonFiction festival is not a thing which you can name in France because there is not such a thing. You're going to conferences, you are going to lectures, you spend your life, your whole life, when you're interested in doing that. But I'm so glad that there is a sort of middle way between shining India, which is not going to trickle down to the poor people. This is what I think is wrong. This is the huge gap between this shining India. It was spoken a little bit earlier about the middle class. I think that, of course, this middle class is going to work out things maybe. But this shining India is something which is a cheating aspect of India. And, well, for a foreigner, the question here is why? Always why. This country is an overwhelming puzzle. Why on their better schools? Why on their better hospitals? Why now rich people from the West come here to to be able to be cured, and why even that given first to the Indian people? So, well, what you've been talking about is just so thrilling to me. I can only thank you very much. But, well, there would be so many questions that, it could last forever. But thank you for, NonFiction is really...
I'll just, one line of yours struck to me, so I'll just make a small point. Is Shining India really a cheat of a line? Is Shining India completely misleading? When I was writing my book, and the working title was Tales from Shining and Sinking India, the idea was to have some other title, but then the publisher said this is absolutely fine. And then I thought about it also, and I looked at my chapters that I had, and about 50% of them were Tales from Shining India. Now, what is Shining India? Does it mean only economic prosperity? It doesn't, because India embodies a lot of other shining aspects. One of the chapters that I have is about the whole Tibetan civilization that is existing in McLeodganj today. So basically, the whole fact is that we are Atiti Deva Bhava, the guest is God, That aspect is also a shining aspect. Today, we are sending rockets to the moon and to Mars. Watching a PSLV rocket launch in front of me with the sound of 50 jet engines is a shining aspect for me. The religious celebrations, whether be it, you have to go to Red Fort to see the namaz that is offered in absolute peace, is a moment of shining, because despite every attempt to break our communities on religious lines, we still, a Hindu will go to a Muslim's house to have feast during Eid, a Muslim will also celebrate Diwali, the festivities of India, those are also shining aspects of India. So besides the economy, there are so many aspects that make India a shining country, but it will always remain a country that will have sinking aspects and shining aspects. It is a dichotomy. This nation will exist always as a dichotomy.
You are perfectly right. I was thinking of the average Western person, who thinks of shining India through movies, through weddings, spending
extravagance,
millions and millions, which we condemn now in our countries because we think that it's a shame. So you're perfectly right. I do understand that because I'm interested in India, and so I go a little bit further. But
So do we have a happy ending? We want a happy ending here. Huh?